Hi folks, ThriceRisen here with an important question. Magic cards. What are they really good for? What are they really worth? I have many stacks of magic cards here, part of a recent acquisition, and I have some more in here, part of the same recent acquisition. And like any good magic card, it's worth the effort to get it, because, well, this doesn't want to open. Look. More magic cards. And yet more magic cards. But that's not all. I have more magic cards in this wonderful stack. Here they are. So, you might be wondering why I have so many magic cards. It's because I have this binder. And it has a lot of blank pages in it. And, well, that just won't do. See, I'm going to fill this binder with magic cards. Why? Because it's a binder. It was designed to be filled. Now, you might be wondering, what's the purpose of this whole rant? Well, there really isn't a purpose of this rant. It's to give me space to talk, to clear my mind for other videos which will be posted soon. But, for some people, for one person in particular, this video will, at some point in the future, make a lot of sense. Because it's been a long time coming. The work of Daniel Lundgren has been held off too long. And if you don't know who Daniel Lundgren is, he is a artist who makes art for magic cards, and his art is on this card that I'm sleeving right now. So, feel free, browse the great work of Daniel Lundgren, and maybe you'll be inspired to build a deck, or be inspired to do something with his wonderful work. I don't know Daniel. He's not endorsing me. I am endorsing him because his art is meaningful. His art is going to have impact. And because of this, it's just another way that magic can be made fun. These cards that I'm sleeving up into this binder don't really have a purpose for a deck. What they do have is value. And that's kind of the thing, isn't it? Friends and family get a little perplexed when I mention to them that I play Magic, and I pay a lot of money for certain cards. And they're like, well, it's just cardboard, isn't it? How could you pay so much money for cardboard? I tell them tales of cards like Black Lotus and, the Moxen. Cards which I haven't purchased. I'm not that wealthy, nor do I play Vintage. But the fact remains is that these pieces of cardboard are assigned great value by many people. And I think it's interesting. It's a proof that we, as human beings, can assign tremendous value to things that don't make sense to anyone else. We see this most often in, heirlooms, personal keepsakes. Up on this shelf behind me, I have a small notebook with a toucan on it. It means nothing to anyone else. However, to me, it represents some of the earliest examples of my writing ever. Not fiction writing, just writing from a very, very young age. And it's something I still have to this day. Personal value. Value that only means something to a specific person or a specific group of people. And there are some people who would say you can't really put a price on that. You can't say, okay, there's only so much value that you can be given, that you can ascribe to a personal item. after that, it doesn't make sense. I don't think that's the case. We assign insane value, which is funny that I picked the word insane because some people think it's insane. Some people think it's insane that I would spend money on pieces of cardboard. Even people who play Magic the Gathering might think it insane that I have spent money on these particular pieces of cardboard. There's a lot of them. But it's all about personal value. It's all about the worth that you get out of the expenditure. People pay huge amounts of money for autographs. Just because someone whose existence they value, some famous athlete or pop singer, put ink notes on a mundane object that might normally not cost you that much. It could be a piece of paper. They're cheap. These pieces of cardboard were also very cheap. But suddenly, it's worth hundreds, thousands of dollars, just because someone that we value has done something to it that suddenly we ascribe more value to. I got a signed card at Grand Prix Washington, D.C. this year. It was signed by Titus Lunter, one of the artists of Magic. Is this card going to be worth a lot? Probably not. How do I know this? Because it's a basic swamp that is damaged, actually. I found it outside the convention center in the grass. It had been mauled and, I would almost say, chewed up, damaged. It had been discarded, along with other cards in a pack. And I had been talking with Titus briefly throughout the Grand Prix, stopping by his booth, saying hello, chatting with him about his work. And we did legitimately purchase some prints from Noah Bradley, his full art island prints, or full art land prints from the Zendikar expeditions. That whole saga of, or series, if you will, of art that he did. And we purchased some things from Titus Lunter as well. But I thought it would be funny, or I thought it was just an interesting thing if I went in and got this island, or this swamp, signed. And I said, "You're not going to believe what I found outside on the grass." And I showed it to him, and he said, "Who would have done this?" Because it was his art on the card. And so he signed it, and I paid for it, and it was a fun memory. It's a card that I will never get rid of. It has no real value to anyone other than myself and maybe Mr. London. But it's ascribed value. It's something that has, because of some strange sequences of events, is important to me. Another example of this, and one that is probably more relatable to many of you who play Magic. How many of you still have the very first, maybe not a Magic card, but the very first rare you ever pulled out of a pack or were given? I do. I have the exact card, not just that printing of the card. I have the exact first card I ever owned as part of Magic. It was the F&M promo of Scarred Goliath. It's not a really great card. In standard it could be interesting. I'm cracking into a new set of cards to sleeve here. So, it's not really that great of a card, but it's my first card. And I'll hold on to it. The same, for me, also applies to German Magic cards. I enjoy collecting German Magic cards, specifically. Because some of you may know that I wouldn't consider German my second language, but it is the language next to English that I am most proficient in. And so I have a weird thing about foreign cards. I usually don't like them, but if I can read them, which I know enough German to be able to read 70 to 90% of most of the cards, then I'll get it, because I can at least read the card and explain it, and I'll usually get something commonly known, like Soul Ring or Elixir of Immortality, cards that people know what they do. But this is known enough that even a friend of mine, when we were at the Grand Prix, he got me a German Juggernaut. Is it a card I'll ever put in a deck? Probably not. It would have to be a very interesting combination of events and ideas for me to put that card into a deck. But I'll keep it, probably forever, just because it was a thoughtful gift that means something to me. And the idea of sentimental attachment to objects is something that I've been thinking about a lot recently. It's something that I think is both overdone and underdone. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is there are many instances in our modern world where I think we crave objects not for the value that we find in the object, but for the value that object can bring to us. I'm very guilty of this, especially, strangely, in Magic, because if you think about it, Magic is all about the value that the card can bring to us. Or at least it is, especially if you're trying to build competitive decks. You know, I might not want a Mox Diamond because I really like the card aesthetically. I might want a Mox Diamond because I know that it'll give me that whatever percentage of extra value in my deck. Now, in that particular case, that's a slightly faulty example because I do enjoy the aesthetics of Mox Diamond. But in the end, these are pieces of cardboard with words on them. And so the value is entirely in what those words say, because if you were to take a blind person, and I know there are visually impaired people who play Magic, and I'm not saying anything against them, but if you take a blind person who doesn't care at all about Magic, and you hand them this card, and you say, this piece of cardboard is worth 2 cents. This piece of cardboard is worth $2. And they'll say why. They feel the same. They're pieces of cardboard. And it's about the value of the words that are on them and the function that they can employ in a deck. For example, a great example of this is the sometimes hilarious what's the word I'm looking for? The sometimes hilarious misassessment of Magic cards. Treasure Cruise. When it was spoiled, people thought it was junk. People thought this card might see some play in Standard, in Delve-centric decks, but it's not going to have any meaningful impact in Standard or any of the other formats. The same was said for Dig Through Time. Both of those cards are now banned at the time of this video. They are now banned in Modern and Legacy, and they are both restricted in Vintage. Gross misassessment of these cards. Now, some people were savvy and they said, you're all wrong, you're all crazy, this card is amazing. But the general consensus from a lot of people was that they were garbage. They did not assign any value to the card. And so these cards, they were traded away like fodder. I had over a dozen Treasure Cruises. And they were worthless. Get rid of them. I have no need for them. But suddenly, people began discovering these cards are really something. These cards really advance deck strategies. Especially in formats like Modern, where you had access to Delver and other things like that. And suddenly these cards became very expensive. Now, their price point has dropped because of the bannings, but if not for the bannings, Treasure Cruise and Dig Through Time would be enjoying quite a lot of monetary value. And that's actually another good point, is suddenly, because you could no longer use these cards in Modern and in Legacy, their value evaporated. The card did not change. The text on the card did not change. but people's ascribed value, the value they gave to those exact same cards that were worth lots of money before, suddenly they're not worth money because people don't want them. The value is gone. We have decided, quite arbitrarily, that they're not important, that they're not something we value anymore. And I think Magic is kind of like a perfect study of how we as human beings can be very fickle with our value. We can assign value to something one day, and then the next day, discard it. And I think, I don't know how I feel about that. I think it's true through all of humanity. But I think that this is being maybe overdone in our modern society. And don't mistake this as like a rant against Magic or a rant against anything. It's just an observation that we have become so used to having value temporarily and then discarding something when it's no longer useful to us, that we do it with things that perhaps we shouldn't do. Oh goodness, they're all micro-sleeved. That's interesting. I'll have to fight my way into this. Oh, it's just a big old thick penny sleeve that they put a bunch of cards in. Things when you order lots of cards, they send you a lot of cards. So, maybe if you're watching this video, some of you may have figured out what's going on with all these cards and sleeving while I'm blathering on like this. But maybe some of you haven't. And for those of you who haven't, don't worry, I'll post a video later revealing what it is that I'm up to with all these cards. The answer is, I'm up to something, and it involves cards. But, so, pardon my diversion into a rant, I don't want to call it a rant, because rant just has an angry sound to it. Monologue. We'll call it a monologue. I'm monologuing. And I've got my monologuing top hat on today. And, I think that we probably should be more careful where or how we give value to things. Because I think value is a finite resource. And what I mean by that is we have only so much time in a day. Our time is limited. Our attention is limited. Our capacity to care is limited. And so we have to choose constantly, every day, how we're going to spend that time. And of course, we're going to spend that time on things that we value. Either because we genuinely value them or we value them to some ulterior end. Obviously, many of us, if we could get away with it, we wouldn't work another day in our lives. But we spend a lot of time working because we value the goal, the gain that work provides. It gives us money. It gives us maybe a insurance or a 401k for that eventual dream of retirement that some of us might never get, some of us might get it. And some of that's up to work, some of that's up to other things, but that's a rabbit trail just a little bit. But we put time into work because we value the effect it gives us. And then we put time into watching television because we value just the ability to relax and unwind after a day of work. And we put time into spending time with our family because, well, many of us value our family. Some of us don't, but in that case, maybe some of you don't put time into spending time with your family because you don't value those things. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, I'm just saying we put time into what we value. Either because it's something we genuinely care about, like Magic. I genuinely care about the game and I love playing it and I value the friendships that I've made in it. So I put a lot of time into Magic. I'm spending however many minutes carrying on while sleeving up cards. This is time I'm putting into Magic that I could be doing something else. I could be doing any number of things. I could be taking a shower. I could be going to the gym. I could be doing anything other than talking at a camera and sleeving up cards. But here I sit, because I value these things. I value the conversations that sometimes happen in the comments. I value the interaction with the local Magic community. I value the result of all this sleeving. I value what this result is going to be, because I suspect it's going to be a good result. But now we come to an interesting part of this discussion where I've been sleeving cards for many minutes. But now I am going to start unsleeving cards, because I reached a part in the binder where I realized that there were cards still in here. And this is actually a perfect example of value. I recently got rid of a lot of my excess Magic cards. I got rid of quite a lot. But I kept some. A lot of them were cards that have what I'll call end value, meaning that they're functional cards that are good in decks. So, Mystical Tutor, Tooth and Nail, cards like that, the cards that are good for decks. But then there were, of course, cards like my Scarred Goliath that I kept entirely because of sentimental value. These Rakdos Cacklers are a perfect example of that. Why do I have Rakdos Cacklers, Rakdos Shred Freaks, and Spike Jesters in a binder? Why do I have those? Well, it all goes back to the original set that I started playing Magic in, which was Return to Ravnica. And the very first standard deck that I built at the time was Rakdos Aggro. Spike Jesters, Rakdos Cacklers, Rakdos Shred Freaks, and Ash Zealots, which I don't actually own any of those anymore, but I kept the Rakdos Cacklers. There's a part of me that would even go as far as sleeving up the deck to play casually with friends in like a weird, I don't care if I'm going to win Modern format. But I kept them because they're sentimental to me. Spike Jester is not going to be a card that tears apart Modern anytime soon. It's just not. But it has value to me, so I'm keeping it. I'm not going to get rid of them. More cards. So now that diversion is over and we return to sleeving cards. So for those of you who know anything about these kinds of binders, you know they have a lot of sleeves in them. They have a lot of capacity for cards. That most people use them to hold rares. I'm not doing that. These are not rares. These are not mythics. They are not uncommons. These are commons that I am sleeving. And they have a high value. Not monetarily. Sentimentally. They have a very high value. And I think it was entirely worth the monetary value that I spent on these cards. Ordered them all at once. There's rather a lot of them. And I'm sleeving them up in this binder for some unknown purpose. So, to kind of meander towards a conclusion, there's a card in here that shouldn't be in there. So, we'll have to see if I actually received enough of the card that I ordered. That'll be amusing if I'm exactly one short. But, because the goal is to fill this binder with cards. And they sent me a card that was not the right card. So, we'll see. Maybe it accidentally slipped in there. Or maybe it was a bonus that they're just saying, hey, we'll get rid of this other junk common. But this is a project that has been in the works for some time. And again, it's what I would have said earlier is an insane expenditure. Not monetarily, but just why? Why would ThriceRisen order giant stacks of cards and sleeve them all up in this binder? Well, that's because to use the third person, ThriceRisen has a plan for these cards. And that plan consists highly of an inside joke, which I will share after I have properly sprung the joke. And the result is we still had enough. So there are enough cards in here. So here you have it, a full binder full of cards. I'm ThriceRisen, and I value this. What you value is up to you, but make sure that you ask yourself, is it really worth my time and effort to value this thing? And that's not to discourage you from valuing things. Our lives are all about what we value. But in the end, I think we are often tricked into valuing things that are a waste of time, or are a waste of money, or just a waste of our attention. So ask yourself, what do you value? What's really important? Thanks for watching.